The various allies that we interact with throughout the Guild Wars 2 story play an incredibly important part in that story. In this video, I want to highlight my 10 favorite story characters in all of Guild Wars 2. To clarify, we're talking about allies, the friends and partners that journey with us throughout the world of Tyria. If you want to hear about villains, we can talk more about them in the future, but you can also check out my top 10 bosses in Guild Wars 2 video, which covers every area of the game. But starting off with number 10 is Caithe. Caithe is one of the longest running and frequent characters that we interact with throughout Guild Wars 2's story, where she played a big part in Destiny's Edge during the Edge of Destiny novel, and then becomes the mentor for the Sylvari player character during the personal story. And I definitely have a bit of bias here, as I have played a Sylvari character since 2012, and Caithe has always been a character that I liked quite a bit. But beyond the personal story, we see Caithe interacting with us in Living World Season 1, before she begins to have a crisis in Living World Season 2 that leads to the events of Heart of Thorns, where she kind of betrays us by doing what she thinks is best, but begins to make up for it in Living World Season 3 and Season 4, where of course in Season 4 she became bonded with Aurene and became the eventual leader of the Crystal Bloom, which is a role that she currently possesses. And I just really like Caithe's character arc, where she feels guilt from the death of Snaf and Glint, to eventually redeeming herself by helping defeat Zaitan and Krakatorrik, to having a crisis of purpose, to eventually finding purpose through her connection with Aurene, from betraying S to helping us defeat Mordermoth and rebuilding our broken trust, to always having wanted to do the right thing to protect people, to becoming a leader of an organization that does just that. She's a gladiator, a thief, a mentor, and overall a good friend to the commander throughout the years. In the number 9 spot is another Sylvari, and it's Canach. Canach is generally a fan favorite character throughout Guild Wars 2's story. Some people, like my fiance, find him annoying, but most others find him a very humorous and entertaining character. Personally, I think Canach's writing finds a good balance between being serious while also being comical, where I don't think he is a goofball that is messing around while the road is ending, but is a competent character that has a laid-back personality with the occasional interesting motive. Canach was introduced in Season 1 as an anti-hero, where he is breaking the law but is doing it to save innocent people from greedy capitalists. In Season 2, we learn that he was forced into the servitude of a niece to pay for his crimes, where he helps us through Heart of Thorns in Season 3 while being Canach and eventually being freed by a niece. We then see him interacting with us throughout Path of Fire and all the way through Into Dragons, where during Path of Fire he begins to focus a lot of attention on accumulating wealth, where he placed hefty wagers on us being able to defeat Balthazar and made a lot of money from that. Where in Into Dragons he began to find a business empire that deals in underground activities where he makes quite a bit of money from his endeavors, where at the very least the commander should stay on Canach's good side because of the potential funding support that the Sylvari can provide. In the number 8 spot is Rytlock. Rytlock is another member of Destiny's Edge who, much like Caithe, has continuously interacted with us throughout the entirety of Guild Wars 2, and Rytlock is a pretty popular character, where through his popularity, his involvement in the story, and ArenaNet's own machinations, I generally consider Rytlock as the face of Guild Wars 2. He was on a lot of promotional material for the original game, was in one of the novels, had a short story written about him, had a standalone game made about him, was in the Super Adventure Box ad, was featured in the short-lived MXM MOBA game, and has just been involved in a lot of Guild Wars 2 stuff since before Guild Wars 2 released, where Rytlock really is Guild Wars 2. When it comes to the character himself, like I said, he has just been with us for a long time and has been a staple part of the story. He's consistently helping out the commander and has been pretty much featured in every era of the game, and I like his character. He's overall just a pretty cool guy. He has quite a few badass moments and is just generally a nice and likable character. He's a good mentor to new char characters and a competent ally to the commander. He's also the first Revenant, which his storyline with Glint and the events of Edge of Destiny connected to him becoming a Revenant and channeling the powers of Glint is just a super cool storyline. In the number 7 spot is Marjory. Now this is the only official member of Dragon's Watch that was introduced to us in Living World Season 1 that I have on this list, where Dragon's Watch as a whole has played a pretty big part in the story of Guild Wars 2, starting in Season 1 and becoming an official thing in Season 3, where Marjory is just a really interesting and intriguing character that has worked with us over the years. Unfortunately, Marjory's character has suffered a bit by being absent for multiple long stints throughout the entire story, but the time she has been on screen has been great. Her relationship with her family has always been a really cool storyline, where I love the pseudo quest that we do during Ender Dragons that involves her family, and how Belinda's death during Season 2 has shaped Marjory in the years since then has been really cool to see unfold. Her relationship with Kasmeer is also a pretty decent storyline that goes on, where this is probably the most prominent romantic relationship that we interact with throughout all of Guild Wars 2. I really like the whole detective storyline and vibe that is connected to her, and I'm really happy that that is starting to return with what we saw during End of Dragons. And overall, Marjory is just a pretty cool character who I have always enjoyed. In the number 6 spot is Aurene. This is a really interesting character because she is basically the main character of the game for the first 10 years of it. We're starting all the way back in the original Guild Wars. We learn a little bit about Glint's scions and the potential children she has had. Then in Season 1, we begin to learn more about the Zephyrites. That leads to us learning a lot about Glint's egg in Season 2 that becomes a prominent part of the Heart of Thorn story, where she hatches during Season 3, and we begin to bond with this absolutely adorable baby dragon, where Aurene then plays a central part in the Path of Fire story, before eventually growing and becoming an elder dragon during Season 4, while playing a central part in the Icebreed Saga, and an incredibly important part in the End of Dragons expansion, where, to summarize and simplify a lot of details, she's basically the solution to the magic problem in Tyria. A lot of people don't like Aurene because of how important she is for the story and how much of the story revolves around her, and I will say that I am definitely happy that her story has concluded, but I personally think that her character, her development, and her story has been a pretty decent part of the story. If you were to consider Rytlock as the face of Guild Wars 2, then Aurene would be the face of the Seasons of the Dragon story, where even if you are not a big fan of her, you have to admit that she is an incredibly important character for the story and is a central part of the first 10 years of Guild Wars 2, and overall, I do enjoy her character. I really like her story arc over the years, from Egg to Elder Dragon. I like how we got to bond with her and grow a deeper connection with her compared to other characters, and I like the concept of riding on her back like we do in the final episode of Season 4. In the number 5 spot is Zojja. This is the last member of Destiny's Edge that I have on this list, and the biggest reason she is on this list is because of her story development during the Secrets of the Obscure expansion. I think overall, I like Zojja a bit less than Caithe and Rytlock, but I just really love her story during Secrets of the Obscure, and I am incredibly excited to see it continue to unfold in the future. Looking back at the novel Edge of Destiny, we see that Zojja was probably emotionally harmed the worst because of the death of Snaf, who was her mentor, and that death has played an important part in her story moving forward in Guild Wars 2, where she has taken up the mantle of being the mentor for the Ashura player character as well as Taimi. We get to see her develop as both a scientist and a person throughout Guild Wars 2's story, as she plays a large part in multiple dungeons and the personal story, a bit in Season 1 and Season 2, as well as being a primary part of the story's objective during Heart of Thorns, where after Heart of Thorns, we have the infamous moment of Zojja being absent from the story for 8 years, where a lot of people, myself included, were upset that Zojja was absent from the game, but I think with the story that was told during Secrets of the Obscure about what happened during that time, alongside the stories told during Secrets of the Obscure itself, more than made up for her absence from the story. Her character arc and development is one of my favorites across all of Guild Wars 2. In the number 4 spot is Trahearne. This is a hit or miss character in Guild Wars 2, where people either really love him or really hate him, and for me, I love him. People don't like him because of a similar reason to people hating Cormyr in Guild Wars. Cormyr becomes a god instead of you, Trahearne becomes the leader of the pact instead of you. And well, I like that both of these characters do that instead of you. It makes significantly more sense for them too from a story perspective. And I really like Trahearne. I find him a charismatic and relatable leader, where he is a good person that really cares about other people, but is uncertain about his own capabilities to lead, where despite his uncertainties, he steps up to lead the pact because he is who the pact needs in order to succeed. And throughout his time in Guild Wars 2, I genuinely enjoyed his presence in the story from beginning to end. I think it definitely helps that I play a Sylvari character, and naturally love a character more when they are a Sylvari. Where when it comes to the Sylvari as a whole, Trahearne is a pretty cool character given that he is the first ever Sylvari. Additionally, while Canach may be one of my fiance's least favorite characters in the game, Trahearne is above and beyond her favorite. Coming in at number 3 is a 3-for-1, and it's the Order Mentor. The spot goes out to Sieran of the Derman Priory, Forgal Kernson of the Vigil, and Tybalt Leftpaw of the Order of Whispers. Out of the 3, Tybalt is above and beyond the most popular in the community, and for me personally, I think Forgal is my favorite by a very close margin. All 3 of these characters are ones you meet at the start of Chapter 4, where they help introduce you to the order that you joined as you go on an important mission for that order, like the counter-offensive against Ajax Anvilburn if you are a member of the Vigil. After that, they help you in Chapter 5 as you help a lesser race of Tyria together, and then after that, in Chapter 6, is where the big moment for each of these characters happen, where they give up their life in order to buy enough time for you and the Lion Guard to evacuate Claw Island and warn Lion's Arch about Zaitan. There have been a lot of sacrifices and deaths by story characters in Guild Wars 2, but people generally consider this sacrifice to be one of the most well done in the game, where a lot of people really develop a connection to each of these characters and then feel a genuine loss when they sacrifice themselves. And each of these characters' personalities are honestly great and lovable in different ways. Sieran is a trustworthy friend who would stand by your side through anything. Tybalt is a lovable ally who is trying his best to help the people of Tyria, and Forgal is the helpful mentor who commands respect. And you can tell, story-wise, that the respected mentor has had a major impact on the pack commander, and that their experience together really shaped who they are later on in the story. And if you thought a 3-for-1 was bad, in the number 2 spot I have an 11-for-1, and it is my favorite members of the Astral Ward and Wizard's Court, specifically Iscaran, Lear, Mabon, Dagda, Frode, Zizzo, Rytlock, Gladium, Yuno, Galrath, and Narcisse. We could also add Zojja to this list, but since I've already talked about her, we'll just leave her out. Additionally, you could add a lot more people to this list, but these are just my favorites and I'll limit myself to them. Where the Secrets of the Obscure expansion is my single favorite piece of story or area of content or whatever in the game when it comes to the characters. We talked a bit about this with Zojja, but the characters' stories, arcs, development, and so on in this expansion was phenomenal. It is incredibly refreshing to have a huge cast of characters that we know barely anything about, where every single character I mentioned in that list are brand new characters, and I honestly love them all. The writing surrounding each of them is great, and I just can't reiterate how much I enjoy the characters of Secrets of the Obscure. If I were to do something a little fun and do a top 11 list within a top 10 list, I think I would rank the characters as this. And the number 11 spot would be Galrath, then Narcisse, then Zizzo, then Yuno. I kinda rank Gladium and Rytlock together, but I would put Rytlock in the number 8 spot and Gladium in 7, followed by Iscaran, Frode, Lear, and Dagda. Then in the number 1 spot would be Mabon. And this was kind of a hard ranking to do because I love all of them, but I think this is an accurate order for which ones I like the most. I do hope that future expansions look at the character development and storytelling of Secrets of the Obscure and carry it forward. Obviously, it would be unsustainable to have as many fleshed out characters as Soto does, but even doing things like they did with Zojja, where we have this type of storytelling on characters we already know a lot about, would be phenomenal. Overall, Soto's characters were great, and I hope this is the new norm. And now for the number 1 spot, for my favorite story character in the entire game, and it's gotta go to General Almorra Soulkeeper. A lot of people who watch my videos know that I have made quite a few lore and story videos, and I love Almorra so much that I had to make a whole 22-minute video about her, which unfortunately was a bit of a lower quality video on my channel, but it's still one of my favorite scripts I've written. I don't 100% know why I love her so much to the point that she's my favorite character in the game. I think a bit of it comes from bias since I joined the video on my main character, and while I have grown to like the Dermot Priory more in my years playing the game, I still identify as a member of the Vigil. But Almorra herself just has a super cool story, with her being a member of the Blood Legion and being stalwart in her duty to her legion, to losing her warband to Krakatorrik and having an emotional crisis as a Gladium, to her meeting Laranthir and the two creating the Vigil together, to her actions to help the people of Tyria, the Pact and the Pact Commander in the campaigns against Zaitan, Krakatorrik, and other operations like the events of Bloodstone Fen, to her finally claiming justice for her warband in the aforementioned campaign against Krakatorrik, to the events of Iceboot Saga, which before Champions is some of my favorite storytelling in the game, were her actions during the prologue and the events of Steel on Fire, which really made me love her character even more, where, in Steel on Fire, she is killed by Bangar and Ryland, which puts an end to her story, which on one hand is sad because she is such a great character and we won't see her again in the story, but on the other hand is great. A sense of finality to a story is one of my favorite things in games. I love it when loose story beats and various characters' stories come to an end, be it through the death of said character or from the character being written off in a sensible way. Where I think Almorra's story, beginning to end, is one of the best stories in Guild Wars 2, and Almorra is my favorite story character in all of Guild Wars 2. And that's my list. I hope you enjoyed. There are a ton of story characters in the game, and it was really hard to make my list of favorites. I threw some honorable mentions down in the description, but feel free to make an argument for any other character in the game to be on this list because there are quite a few great characters in this game. I hope you are taking good care of yourselves. Have a good one, everyone.